I that's a tough act to follow, I gotta say.
I don't know about that, but everybody, welcome. This is the DevOps and Drinks crew. Obviously not drinks yet. Hopefully very soon we will be together again, hanging out, having some fun. But we're bringing back an old friend, Mr. Robert Ross. Third or fourth engagement with us in a couple of years now. Thank you.
Yeah.
CEO of Fire Hydrant. They're awesome. He'll tell you a little bit more about them. They make the best shirts, but they don't share with me.
Well, we're gonna share. Send me your address, and
All right,
we'll get you.
I'm gonna take you up on it.
Hey, folks.
Well, I don't know what's going on there with this thing.
Well, we're gonna do a talk around pragmatic incident management and response. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get kicked off here real soon. Present. So as Alex mentioned, my name is Robert Ross. People call me Bobby Tables. It's an old nickname that I've kept for a number of years now. And today what we're talking about is pragmatic incident response.
I gotta see if I can get it back up again. So I'll get out of here, maybe try this.
And if you're in the audience and there's other things going on, maybe a quick mute, that'd be great. The virtual world makes it a little harder. So we're going to be talking about lessons learned from failures. So real quick, who am I? My name is Robert Ross. I am the co-founder and CEO of Fire Hydrant. We are an incident management tool building the reliability platform for people to build more reliable and effective software. Bobby Tables across the internet, on Twitter, on GitHub, on Instagram. That's invite only. And let's go ahead and move on. Title side, 3 tips on pragmatic incident response. I'm going to share 4 today for us in the audience. And one of my favorite bands of all time is Blink-182, and one of their best songs is All the Small Things. And really, this is a lead into talking about my elevator. So I live in an old candy factory. I live in New York City, in Williamsburg, and I live right next to Domino Park. That's an interesting thing that's happening. And where I live next to Domino Park, there's an old candy factory. And so one of the things when they retrofitted this factory into an apartment building is you put in newer elevators, you make it really nice, have really nice tall ceilings. But my elevator, some of the buttons don't light up when you press them. The LED display is mismatched from the floors and the button labels. And generally it's just a piece of crap. And when I made this slide, since I've made this slide, I should say, I even got stuck in this elevator for a terrifying 30 seconds. I was sitting in my elevator and going down, and it suddenly lurched and stopped, and the emergency brake kicked in. And that was a terrifying moment for me because I was like, oh, well, this is how I go. But generally, most of the time, it goes up and down. And then to my surprise, on April 8th, 2021, there was an out of order sign put on the elevators. And actors were used in this photograph. I couldn't snap a photo before it was actually fixed. And this was my face when this elevator finally had a sign on it that said it's out of order. No way. The elevator where the buttons don't light up and the signs mismatched and the floor is wrinkled suddenly doesn't work. Shocking. And this is a bigger lead into something I like to say is that the habit of ignoring the small issues you have in any system often leads to bigger issues. And so my first tip that I'm going to give everyone here on this wonderful Thursday afternoon is focus on the small incidents first. I think a lot of people, they try to run retrospectives for these large harrowing incidents that occur, the whole website's down, people are angry, and then they run a retrospective, and that's their first foray into running retros. But those aren't the best ones. I would go for the low stake incidents first. They often have the most actionable takeaways. Instead of writing a ticket that says re-architect async pipeline as a Jira ticket that never is going to happen, you can write simpler tickets such as increase memory on this particular service, or add a better target for the alert on this service. And they are a great intro into behavior change, because that's really what you're trying to go for when you're improving your reliability. Is you're going for behavior change, not reduce incidents. You want to change behaviors globally across your company. So that's my tip number one. And this was said very, very well by Heidi Waterhouse. She works at LaunchDarkly, and she has a great quote in this increment article, increment.com/reliability/failure is okay, that a plane with many malfunctioning call buttons may also be poorly maintained in other ways, like faulty checking for turbine blade microfactors or landing gear behavior. And this was a really well said statement. It's like, if you're on a plane and maybe it smells a little bit, the buttons look janky or whatever it is, you kind of get the sense of like, what's going on with this plane? And that's the same exact thing with software. We should always be trying to improve the small things first. All right, moving on here. So what do you measure? So one of the things that you can measure is knowing how much. It's important to know how much you're improving. Are you improving your MTTR? Is it going down? And that's like one of the more important metrics that you actually can be measuring is that MTTR metric. And if we go to the next slide, tip number 2 is to track your MTTR, your mean time to resolution. MTTR is a great statistic to measure and improve incident management response in your team. But of course, I'm actually trolling everyone here, because mean time to resolution is the worst metric that you can actually track when you're dealing with incidents. You're averaging across multiple incidents of varying degrees of difficulty to respond to. It's generally never it's pretty much a piece of crap metric to measure how much you're actually improving your incident response. So the metric that I'm referring to in repurposing this acronym is your mean time to retrospective. How long is it taking before the end of your incident, before you have your retrospective in your team? How long is that taking? And the reason I care about this is that our memory fades very quickly, very, very quickly. And Erman Ebbinghaus doesn't have a Twitter account, older dude. He discovered that memory loss occurred rapidly over the first few hours or days, but showed a more steady, gradual decline over subsequent days, weeks, and months. So what he's saying here is that you can teach someone something, but unless they immediately start using that information and acting upon it, they're going to forget. So you might have an incident that lasted 5 hours, and if you wait a week, two, you might as well not have a retrospective at all. Because the easiest way to have a bad incident retro is to wait 2 weeks. Easiest way. Don't even bother. I promise you, nothing will be lost if you wait 2 weeks to do a retro. Do them as fast as you possibly can. So my tip number 2, with substantially less troll, in fact, 100% less troll, track your mean time to retro. It's much more valuable to a team. You should hold prompt and consistent retrospectives after your incidents. You can track the ratio of your retros to declared incidents. How many incidents did we have that we didn't have a retro for? Is that 80%? Oh, let's try to get that number down, and our mean time to retro time down as well. And the moment you start doing that, I promise you, I will give you my address if you don't believe me, so you can come like muck me up a little bit, that this is the better metric to track. Splitting by severity of the incident is also potentially valuable. Knowing, okay, well, our sub ones, sometimes we wait a week to actually get a retro going. Like, that's probably the most important one. A sub one incident, pave calendars. there is almost nothing more important than having a retrospective for a high severity incident in your system. Maybe if you have an interview, don't pay that, obviously, right? Candidate experience is important. But if you have like a weekly stand-up, or maybe you have a one-on-one, move them, because the retro for a Sev 1 is far more important than those things if you're trying to learn from incidents, if you're genuinely trying to learn from incidents. So another thing, and I am flying through this, so if we want to ask a lot of questions at the end, please start stacking them up so we don't have that awkward pause of 1 minute before someone asks a question. But the second or the third thing that I like to alert on in incidents is the severity of incidents is directly linked to customer pain, right? That's the only reason we open incidents. We would not open incidents if someone wasn't feeling some level of pain or discomfort with our product. And the way I like to explain this is that a lot of people out there, they're going to alert on computer vitals. So what I mean by that is they're basically going to say that if our system is using 90% of CPU, we're going to wake somebody up. The problem with that is that you're using 90% of your CPU, not 100, and the site is actually operating just fine. And paging people at 2 a.m. because disk capacity is at 80%, or disk usage rather, and won't run out of space until next month is a really good way to lose teammates. I've worked with people in the past that have left companies because they were paged too much for things that were not relevant. And yeah. So alerting on a degraded experience with the service and not much else, that's my tip. A CPU burning hot at 90% is not necessarily a bad thing. The way I explain this is that if I go on a run, if I finally get around to going on a run, my heart is going to start beating faster. That's just what it does. It's designed to do that. It's getting more oxygen to my brain. But if I go on a run and my heart's beating faster and I get lightheaded and I fall, then something is wrong. Something actually that was not designed for it is wrong. So we should be creating our service level objectives that are tied to a customer experience and alert on those. People experiencing problems with the service is the only thing you should alert on, because going back a slide, severity of incidents is directly linked to customer pain. We should only be opening incidents if a customer is feeling pain or will be feeling pain soon. That's like the asterisk of that. And SoundCloud, in my opinion, one of the most advanced engineering teams out there, has a great blog post on this. This quote directly taken from it: "You can apply the same thought to many other actual or potential causes of an outage. Paging alerts, those that wake you up in the middle of the night, should be based on symptoms." So alert on symptoms, not causes. Again, CPU running hot, that's not a symptom. But the website suddenly, slowing down, error rates increasing, that's a symptom of your CPU going up potentially. So highly recommend this. I reference this blog post probably a few times a month, but alerting on SLOs over on the developer SoundCloud domain. So definitely recommend everyone go check that out. And Alex, I'm so sorry how fast I'm going through this right now. But who do you who do you notify about an incident? I think this is super important as well, right? What are we doing when there is an incident? Who should know? Incident notifications can be scary. I still have hauntings. I still am haunted by the PagerDuty sound on my phone. Every once in a while, I still get paged. I'm still in the escalation path of PagerDuty. And you need to tell your entire team about an incident. And really think about that. I think honestly, maybe at like mid-sized companies, the whole engineering team suddenly can be roped into an incident just because it's a high visibility thing at a smaller company. So can a smaller set of people tackle an incident without disrupting the rest of the company? And that's a tough thing to really get a handle on. It really kind of takes maybe an incident commander, an incident communicator, whoever it is, to say, hey, I know you want to know what's going on. I know it seems really bad right now, but we actually don't need you. If we need you in the incident, we'll call you. And that can be a tough thing to implement in these companies. And then you also have to start asking the question, well, all right, well, maybe the website's about to be down. We're seeing our memory increasing crazy high. We're starting to see the symptoms of it. Do we tell customer success now, or do we wait until the pitchforks have been grabbed by the customers and they're coming to us? That's something you also have to balance, because the moment that customer success and support get involved, they want to know what's going on, and they want to know in a distilled fashion about what's going on. They want to know, oh yeah, the error rate's really high. That means nothing. If you actually look, Slack is actually having an outage today, and their wording is nicely done. It's written for a human. It's written for the people that have gone and grabbed their pitchforks running towards Slack. They're saying sporadic errors, right? Doesn't really, that's all that people really need to know. You don't need to get into too much detail, and then people kind of get lost in the sauce. And then the other question I like to ask is like, when do we escalate this thing? When do we kind of know and take a step back? Maybe we're cognitive tunneling in this incident. When do we kind of go backward and say, well, when do we bring someone else into this? There was a tragic Air France flight, I believe it was in the 1980s, maybe the 1990s, that was leaving from Rio and going back to Paris. And there was an event that occurred called cognitive tunneling with the pilot at the time, that they were just so locked on to this one metric that they thought was wrong with the plane that they actually made the situation worse. And if they had this kind of notion of like, I need to escalate this to the pilot that's actually asleep on long haul flights, there's typically another pilot that's maybe sleeping, I need to actually wake them up, because I don't know, like I'm at the end of my rope here. I don't know what else to do. And what I'm doing is not solving the problem. And I typically will say that's when you escalate, is when you're not making progress to solving the problem. That's when you should probably escalate. So my tip number 4 is focused teams will perform the best mitigation. Another phrase that's super common in like households is too many cooks in the kitchen, right? At a certain point, there's diminishing returns on incident management. And if you think about like a fire in a New York City apartment building, they actually will slowly trickle in the fire response. It becomes a 1 alarm fire, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 is the highest. And that's when they go, okay, like this is really out of control. Like we actually do need more response. And it's also, so that's a good example, I think, of real life firefighting that has a strategy around escalation. There is such a thing as over communicating an incident to the company. I have been the person that has done this, and I've only caused myself more pain. For example, we had a problem one time at a previous company at Namely where people couldn't log in. And I told the CEO that. That was not the right person to tell that problem, because all of a sudden now I have a CEO messaging me going, hey, what's the status? What's the status? What's the status? Why can't people log in? I was like, no, people can't log in. Everything else is still working. Payroll's still running. Everything's fine. And for someone that's maybe not as technical, giving them just a little too much too early can cause a lot of problems for you. And logical fallacies in the team can start to occur as well. So that's my 4th tip, my 4th and final. Got through this in about 20 minutes on an hour schedule. But mitigating by committee produces inferior results, right? Too many cooks spoil the broth. Don't mitigate by committee, right? You really should have people that know how to run the process, know what to do, have rollback strategies. Don't bring in people that, are just going to start asking a million questions too early in the incident. A million questions, like 10, 20 questions, that's better suited for the retro. As an incident responder, like I'm in my game, hopefully. Like, please let me just mitigate this thing, and we'll get through it. And so a quick recap. Number 1, declare and run retros for the small incidents, right? Blink way two, all the small things. It's less stressful and your action items will be more actionable. When I first gave this presentation, I got a bunch of people that was like, that was too real. Can you stop being so real? Like, we have too many tickets that say re-architect things. You're never going to re-architect something because of an incident. It has to have other purpose. Number two, decrease the time you take before you analyze an incident. You'll remember more and consequently learn more from the incident. Reduce your mean time to retro. I promise you, this is one of the most important things you can do. Number three, alert on pain felt by people, not computers. I know maybe we personify our computers a little too much, like, oh, poor little computer, it's running at 90% CPU. The computer is fine. Like, we taught sand to think and not much more. They can't feel, right? Like, let the computer run at 90%. It's fine. The only reason we should declare an incident at all is because the people on the other side. The only reason. And number four, consciously mitigate without overdoing the communication. Not as many people need to know exactly what is going on in the moment as you might think. I know that transparency is huge. You want a big, transparent organization. That's fine. But during an incident, you can cause a bit more pandemonium than you really are asking for. We used to joke that if the customer support team was suddenly joining the engineering channel at a previous company, that was enough for us to know that there was an incident. If all of a sudden we saw, oh, another customer support, oh, a third customer support person, uh-oh, like something's definitely broken or they wouldn't be joining this channel. And I will make these slides available for everyone in the audience. If you do want to recap, there's also a blog post that I can point people to. But first and foremost, thanks again for having me on this Thursday lunch slot for talking a bit about incidents. I've over-indexed on my passion towards incidents, it feels like. So if anyone wants to ask questions, book recommendations, tell me what I said was dumb, I love it. You can do it publicly at me on Twitter. If you want to look at some bad code, I'm also on GitHub at Bobby Tables. But with that, Alex,
Bobby,
and also
thank
questions,
you.
I suppose.
I actually have a question just out of my own curiosity and love of tech. Do you recommend that a company, regardless of size, create an incident response team before an incident happens to keep that loop small? Or like there's a lot of variables there, but what would you recommend with something like that just to get ahead of it so it's not overly communicated?
It really depends on the size of the company. So for a super big company, like for example, and this company's talked very publicly about how they do this, Twilio, they have a dedicated incident response team. They have people that are not engineers, that are project managers that join as incident commanders. And they are quite literally responsible for just organizing during an incident. Because Twilio is a big, massive beast. They're dealing with a lot of third-party dependencies. They have incidents all the time. And not like super bad incidents. They're just very public about what's going on in the company. And they have a team dedicated to that. For a smaller company, I would say that it's much more of a hat that someone can put on already at your company. So what we see pretty typically is that a company will actually train up people on how to deal with an incident when an incident comes about. So an engineer probably will get trained up on how to be a first responder incident commander. And they now have a process on how to be an incident commander, but their day-to-day is really still being an engineer. They just don't have enough incidents to justify having that like truly dedicated team in the company.
And is it pretty safe to say the more third-party software, the more incidents is going to happen because too many spinning plates?
I would say it's not typically a consequence. It really depends on the type of thing you're integrating with. For Twilio, as an example, like they're dealing with telecom, and telecom is just, it's a whole different beast. But everyone here is relying on a third-party software vendor to host their stack. So I wouldn't say it's a a direct correlation. It really depends on the complexity of your system. The more complex your system is, the more incidents you're going to have.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. If anybody's got questions, now is the time. Bobby's time is very valuable. He's volunteered it to us. Ask him.
Oh, that's very kind. No,
Sure.
I'm super jazzed about this. So if anyone has anything, let's hear it.
Nothing. We got a shy bunch. Because I'm gonna start playing some Blink-182 songs in a minute. So
No. Quick, someone ask a question.
it's gonna happen. It's a matter of time. All right, guys. If you haven't checked out,
Wait, I think I heard. Well, I think I heard someone come on.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I have a quick question. Just to get back to your example about the CPU going 90% and the fact that we should rely on customer pain to wake up somebody. But for example, if usually CPU is like 50 or 60%, it's just like skyrocketing, ramping up to 90%. Don't we have to wake up someone before customers are impacted? Maybe the basic of incident management is to prevent customer pain, right?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The way I think of it is that, like, you might be sprinting up to 90%, but if you have a history of 90% means bad things, then yes, right? But at that point, I would maybe introduce an overlapping metric where, okay, maybe we're at 90% and traffic has not increased, right? So maybe you can alert on both things. Alerting is typically, I don't know why the industry has kind of gone this way, but alerting is commonly set to be one metric, one alert. And I think it's perfectly okay to say that when this metric of 90% is happening and the metric of website traffic is flat, okay, yeah, we probably should wake someone up because something's definitely going haywire, right? But if traffic is going up and CPU is going up, then probably don't need to wake anyone up. It means that the software is probably just working a little bit harder to accommodate the extra traffic. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you.
I think of it as a Venn diagram. Like if these things are overlapping, then yeah, like let's wake someone up.
Any other questions? Fire away. All right.
All right.
Bobby, thank you so much, as always, for your time. The presentations are always very real world, very non-conceptual, and very real usage. So thank you so much for that.
Happy, always happy to jump in here. And you know, I'll try to add a few more tips and make it an hour next time for you.
You're all good, man. You're all good. Would always like to have you back. And guys, for those of you that haven't checked out Fire Hydrant, please do. They're an amazing company run by great people. Seriously. I don't say that about every company. In fact, I don't say that about most
appreciate
companies.
it. Here in New York City, we're hiring and building great stuff. So, all right, everyone. Well, have a great weekend and stay safe out there.
Thanks, everybody.